It always seems to me as if Lavender was a little woman in a green dress with a lavender bonnet and a white kerchief. She's one of those strong, sweet, wholesome people who always rests you, and her sweetness lingers long after she goes away. That's a quote by Myrtle Reed about lavender. And today in the Essential Materia Medica, we are kicking it off by talking about lavender. So I hope you'll join me. So here is lavender with its scientific name and its Western energetics. It is a bitter, cooling, drying herb for those of you who follow the Western energetics. I will be doing a video on that very soon, and if you're watching in the future, you can check the description box below, or perhaps I have already done a video on the Western energetics. It's helpful to know the energetics of an herb, because if someone is already cool, you don't want to put a cooling herb necessarily in great quantities. You might want something a little more warming, because the whole point of the Essential Materia Medica is to approach essential oils from a holistic perspective rather than an allopathic perspective. So what does that mean? Allopathic means you have a symptom and I am going to select a cure or treatment or whatever to directly counteract that thing. So it's problem, solution, problem, solution. Holistic means that you have a problem, and so you're going to look at the entirety of the person from top to bottom from multiple perspectives as a multifaceted being, and then select the solution or the support that fits all of the person. I find that most essential oil information is from an allopathic perspective because allopathic medicine is the dominant medical culture in industrialized nations, which most of you are from. If you are not from an industrialized nation, or if you have a more traditional upbringing, then you're probably already familiar with this holistic perspective and you're like, say it louder for the people in the back. But if not, welcome to Holistic Medicine. I think it is going to really improve how you use essential oils. Now, on a more spiritual or woo-woo front, lavender is associated with the element of air and also masculinity. So that is a really interesting insight into how the spiritual community categorizes it, especially in contrast to how the Western energetics talk about the bitter, cooling, drying. So with that little introduction put aside, let's jump back into lavender. Essential oils and all other herbs are broken down into their common name and their scientific name, lavender, and here is the scientific name. The scientific name is usually in italics, and this makes sure that you're getting exactly the kind of lavender that you want, because there's many different strains of lavender. So you want to check the scientific name and make sure that any research that you're doing matches the actual kind of lavender essential oil that you're getting. That's why we have the scientific name. On the topic of naming, we think that the English word for lavender has its roots in one of two possible Latin phrases, either lavare, which is to wash, and I'm probably mispronouncing this because I am not a fluent Latin speaker, or lavingula, which is livid or bluish. So lavender, just from that little etymology lesson, has its roots way back in history. It has literally been rooting from this earth for a very long time into human hands. So the essential oil company that I use, Doterra, and I use them because they get their plant material from some of its indigenous places. Many plants grow in lots of different regions, but they try to go to one of the more native regions, and in this case they source their lavender from at-risk farms in eastern Bulgaria, and their ethical practices also go beyond the plant material and into the farming communities. And in this case, they work to really cultivate and develop that Bulgarian farm community from a variety of ways. I have left links down below to their little blurb about their Eastern Bulgarian lavender farm, so you can get a really good idea of where your lavender oil is coming from if you use doTERRA. Most of the other worthwhile essential oil companies have transparent information about where their lavender is sourced from. So check out your bottle of lavender that you might have at home, and as a little homework assignment, go check and see where it's sourced and kind of get a feel of the kind of communities that grew and brought lavender to you. And if you can't find that information, I would consider that a red flag, because you always want to know where your stuff is coming from to make sure that other people were not exploited in the process, and it's not got like janky stuff like, I don't know, petroleum in your lavender oil, which can happen. One of the reasons why we talk about ethical sourcing on the people front is it takes 150 pounds of lavender to make 1 pound of lavender essential oil. That is a lot of human resources and economic resources. So you want to make sure that that is in place and solid when you're sourcing your lavender. So I'm excited to see what you find. If you find anything surprising or interesting about where your personal lavender oil was sourced, let me know in the comments down below. All right, so now let's talk about the therapeutic properties of lavender. I am going to have them scroll by over here so you can kind of get an idea of how many different types of therapeutic properties lavender essential oil has. Now you might be saying, oh yeah, totally, that all those things come from lavender essential oil. Sure. It's because plant matter is made up from tons of different constituents, and all of those different pieces and parts have different actions that they can do. Now, it doesn't mean that every single one of these actions is lavender's superest superpower. It just means that lavender has the capabilities of supporting all of these kinds of actions. There are some that lavender is particularly good at. Lavender is particularly good at any kind of soothing, calming, sleep and relaxation and de-stressing and bringing healing to topical things. It's good for calming digestion. It's a very good first wave oil. It takes care of a lot of various types of imbalance. If there's kind of a flaring of any kind, whether it's emotional or physical, lavender is a good first responder. First responder is a good choice for lavender. The legend goes that it was rediscovered by modern Europeans when the scientist guy got a burn on his hand and he just happened to have some lavender oil nearby, and he plunged his hand in to the lavender oil and it healed quite quickly compared to what he expected. So it's really good for that kind of thing. Is very safe for lots of different people, and there are very few contradictions. So lavender, like I said, it's a good first responder. If you're having more serious or intense issues, you should seek the care of other essential oils that have more specialized constituents. Obviously, if it's a medical emergency or you're not getting care that you need from essential oils, you can seek the care of other types of professionals, be that Western medication or other kinds of medication. Don't ever put your hands in one single mode of healing. As you can tell, the plant matter itself lets you know that we want to have lots of different perspectives that make us up. As far as contradictions or counterindications, there's no really good science and research that I could find. Lots of really small studies or poorly executed data and studies. There's not a lot to be found for contradictions that I could find. Pretty much across the board, this is a safe, gentle oil from everyone from old to newborn to pregnant, any of those things. However, as per usual, always do your own research. The only kind of notable thing I found is some people were saying that it might have too much estrogen for little boys and they could develop breast tissue and other weird things. When I tracked down the genesis of that study, it only followed 3 boys and all of them had a high body mass index. So that would be a good example of a poorly executed study. You can't hardly find out anything with 3 individuals who are all very similar in their build and shape. That's not a good study. So do your own research based on your own self and see what you find. But from my research, I couldn't find anything notable to share here with you guys. As far as some interesting studies on lavender essential oil that support its use in different areas, I found a few, but I narrowed it down to two really interesting ones, and I have the full links down below to that research. But one of them was studying its antifungal properties, and the other one was studying how it is just or more as effective than lorazepam, which is an anti-anxiety drug in women. So if you're interested in some of that kind of science, you can check that out down below. But I thought that was two really good perspectives from more of its psychological, emotional, spiritual calming properties and more of its physical, like antifungal, calming properties. So I wanted to get two kind of halves going in there. So that's why I selected those two studies to highlight. All right, so the first written reference that we have currently, and I would like to point out that many indigenous or oppressed people groups' written records were burned, see the Vikings, early example of oppressed indigenous people in Europe. So I say that with a grain of salt, but the earliest written record we have today is in 77 AD from a Greek physician who noted that lavender essential oil could be used for headaches and indigestion and sore throats, and externally it was really good for cleaning and repairing minor wounds and burns. Just like I said, it's a good first responder. We see that over and over and over again throughout history and different healing cultures. For all of you biblical scholars or Bible nerds out there, there is some interesting debate whether lavender and nard and spikenard are the same thing in the translations, because as we know, translators aren't always experts in herbal healing. So that was an interesting bunny trail. I won't get really deep into it, but for you Bible nerds out there, you can go check out the lavender, nard, spikenard debate. Because nard is mentioned in Song of Solomon, and it's also used in the temple to prepare holy essences. It was, if we're talking about the same essential oil, it was used pretty extensively. There is a passage from Song of Solomon that I can read to you now that is the main nard versus lavender debate battleground. So it was just pretty, so I thought I would read it to you. Nard and saffron with henna and nard, nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with every kind of incense tree, with myrrh and aloes and all the finest spices. So that gives you an idea of the kind of plant material the biblical people were using in at least this Song of Solomon situation. Healing with plants has a very long history, and lavender, like I said, is one of the first. Now, Arab physicians were studying the usages of lavender in plant medicine in the late 900 AD to the early 1000 ADs. That's when we first begin to see their research. Now, Arab physicians were much more research-oriented than their more European counterparts. So we don't have access to as many of their materials in the English-speaking world right now, or at all, but they have a lot of really good information. If you're a history nerd, you can go check their information out. All right, in the description box below, I have a lot more detailed information on the cultivation of lavender in Europe, because we have more information on that, but I'll do a quick little summary. The Holy Roman Empire in the early 800s decided to have all of their monasteries cultivate medicinal plants and flowers, and then later on we are beginning to see actual scientific research done on lavender. They were using it to treat head lice. A lot of the monarchies did things like stuffing their cushions. Glove makers in France were really enthusiastic about it. One of the Queen Elizabeths, I don't remember which one, see the notes, she was really intense about it, and she ordered the cultivation of lavender. However, at some point along the lines, the Roman Empire decided not to have their monasteries cultivate medicinal herbs and flowers anymore, so lavender moved more domestic. And one of the reasons why lavender and laundry has a strong connotation in European culture is it was often planted outside the wash houses, and they would throw their cottons and linens over the top of the lavender bushes to dry them and give them a beautiful, clean fragrance. So that's where the cultural understanding of clean and lavender comes from. Now, the Victorians were particularly interested in lavender. They have lots of language of flowers, and they were very taken with the quaint and fairy-like qualities of lavender and other flowers. So here's another interesting little excerpt that I wanted to read to you guys. Let us revive this ancient love and appreciation of the flower. Let it perfume our linens, our baths, and soothe our nerves with its fragrant tea. Let us honor our gardens with this ancient patrician plant that stands on its simple suit of silver and purple and claims a place among flowers that gold and scarlet can never fill. So, with that kind of romanticism, we moved into World War I and everything was terrible. And it went from a mighty flower that soothes our nerves to back to first responder status. We used it in lots of first aid on the field in World War I. So on the battlefield, we used lavender particularly for the sterilization of equipment, which is not a good usage as we know today, but nonetheless, that's what they used it for, and also cleaning and treating wounds, which is a good usage for it. Citizens where lavender was growing naturally were encouraged to cultivate and pick it and send it to the front lines. So it was definitely a main feature in early first aid in World War I. So you might be familiar with the phrase palsy drops if you are a bit of a history nerd or just old. Now, the British had palsy drops as part of their official materia medica all the way up until the 1940s, and palsy drops was a tincture of lavender. So, when you hear the term palsy drops, that's what they're using. Lavender has been a prominent Western medicine for a very long time. So, now let's talk about how to use it. The typical rate of dilution is 1 to 2% in 1 ounce of carrier oil, 1 to 2 drops applied topically neat, which means it's not diluted into carrier oil, and 1 to 3 drops in a diffuser. That's pretty standard across all essential oils, so there's no weird extra strong or extra weak qualities about this lavender. You can use it intuitively like you might use any other standard essential oil. Now, from my apothecary to your apothecary, it is recipe time. To wrap this up, I'd like to offer you a gift of my favorite super magical roller bottle. This is the #1 roller bottle that we always have. We hand it to my toddler. We put it everywhere all the time forever. We basically just like bathe ourselves in the stuff. I like to give it to my toddler because she can roll it on her body at will, and I'm not worried about her getting too much in her system or burning her little skin, or if she puts it like on her, who even knows? It probably will be fine. So I call it the 2-ingredient magic roller bottle. What you do is you put 10 drops of lavender essential oil and 10 drops of Roman chamomile essential oil in a standard size rolling bottle, and then you fill it up with the carrier oil of your choice. We have used lots of different kinds and like all of them equally. Obviously, if you have any allergies, especially a nut allergy, be careful with the most common fractionated coconut oil. Choose an oil that bases your whole person using our new holistic medicine skills. And then you just shake it up, label that sucker, and rub it on your everything. Avoiding eyeballs and mucous membranes, ideally, because that would hurt. So I hope you enjoyed the first Essential Materia Medica. It was a little klongy because this is my first video, but I think it went pretty well. Tell me what you think in the comments down below. Do you have any particular favorite uses for lavender? Tell me your experiences with lavender oil in the comment section down below. If you're interested in the PDF version of this lesson, I have it linked down below. If you're interested in learning more about Doterra essential oils, I have a collection form linked down below. You pop your information in there, and then I will email you back, and together we will pro bono, for free, discuss and create a plan of holistic care personalized to your whole person. So if you're interested in that, hit me up, and I would love to help. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you want to catch more of these Essential Materia Medicas, hit the subscribe button. And I will see you next time, where we will be discussing wild orange essential oil, another one of my favorites.